So let's create an attribute for building height. Let's just copy this block of code, make sure the indentation is correct. And let's set the name to, type to, and value to v1. So this is the second value, and then it's going to be the first index. In this case, it's not going to be a vector anyway, so that's all right. So we want value to v1, and we're going to set the name to building height, because once we start stacking buildings later on, we want to have the height. And we're going to set the type to 0 because it's a float, whereas the previous value was an integer. And the height is where the bounding box comes in. So instead of passing in a value, we're going to pass in an expression. And if we want to pass in an expression, we have to do set expression, so that Python knows that it's actually an expression that's being set. Because what I want to find is, I want to find the top primitive of the bounding box, right? So we have a bounding box, this is a cube, the bottom primitive is sat on 0, but I want to define how high the top primitive is. That basically then turns into a numerical value, which gives us the height. So what we can do is we can write the expression as follows. So let's write down a prim expression, and I'm using these single quotation marks because I'm going to need double ones inside, and this is a way to distinguish between them in the code. So what I want to do is I want the attributes node to look up one level, yeah, and then I want to find the op input, so that's the node that connects to it, which will be the bounding box node, and op input expected to define to which node the input is looking. In this case, we're looking at our own node, so we just do a dot, and we only want the first input, which is a 0. Of course, there is only one, but it still needs to be defined. Now we know that the top primitive of the bounding box is a 5, so we're going to put down number 5. I want the position, so that's the attribute we're calling here, and from the position information I want the y attribute. So x, y, z means 0, 1, 2, so I want value number 1. That should do the trick. All right, so also let's create an attribute for the building type. Let's just go ahead and copy paste the same block of code again. So let's set the building type, change this to name3 type 3, and in this case, instead of a value, we're going to be working with a string, so we're going to change it to string 3. So with this, we're going to change the building type. Type 3 is going to be 3 for string, and we're going to pass in houses as a value, because what we've done is we've filtered out all the houses, and so we know that we have to set it to this. So that's the attributes on our node. Let's check that our node inside is empty. All right, let's go ahead and import them again. Dive inside and check that's all correct. So here we go. We've got all our houses imported. We've got them turned into bounding boxes, and our attributes are there as well. We can have the building height. The value is set to 1.2 because it infers that from the node above. And as we've shown before, we're asking for the 5th primitive, and that's the top one. It's always the top one. So that's how I know that we always have to refer to that one. All right, so let's do the same for the tower buildings. Let's go back inside, remove them all. And what we can do is we can basically just copy the code. Let's hit Ctrl B to go full screen. All right, let's copy that. And now we have another block of code. Do notice that the second if file.starts with line is at the same indentation level as the first one. So now instead of 0, we're going to say if file starts with 1 to fetch all the tower parts. So most of the code will be the same. The only thing we're going to change is houses to commercial. And if we run that, we should get them all in there. Oh, so many more. And now we can see that we have much bigger parts, these commercial parts. Right, midsection, base section, they're all there. So that's all good. And the attributes are there as well. Now, of course, before we can all use them, I want to create a few merge nodes and switch nodes to make sure that we can actually work with these and call them. Because we're going to use copy stamping later on to get random buildings onto our point clouds. So let's expand on the code a little bit more before we move on to the next part. So we're going to create 2 switch nodes and a merge node. Let's create switch houses. Let's create switch commercial. And let's create a merge. For this, we're going to say switch houses is who.node. And we're going to put it inside this node, of course. dot create node, and we're looking for the node type, which is switch. And instead of leaving it like this, we can also continue by putting down a comma, and now we get to write down a name so that we can also, instead of switch 1 and switch 2, actually have clearer names on these nodes. So let's just call this one switch houses. Switch commercial will be the same. Who.node, well, this node dot create node switch, and we're going to call it switch commercial. Now for the merge node, we can do the same again. Who.node.create node, and we're going to create a merge. In the next video, I'll take you through how to set this merge node with multiple inputs.